Part 1. The Shy Kid and the First Class Ticket, 1869 to 1893.
All right, grab your coffee, man. Let's talk about Mohandas Gandhi. Now, before he was a Mahatma, which basically means great soul, he was just Mohandas, a skinny, incredibly shy kid from a coastal town in India called Porbandar. If you met young Gandhi, you wouldn't think, yeah, this guy is going to take down the British Empire. No way. He was the kind of kid who'd run home from school just so he wouldn't have to talk to anyone. He wasn't a genius in class, either. He was just average. And get this, he got married at 13. 13. It was an arranged marriage to a girl named Kasturba, and Gandhi later admitted he was a pretty jealous and controlling young husband. He was a regular human being with all the regular flaws, you know? His family wanted him to be a big shot lawyer. So at 18, he hopped on a boat to London. Now, imagine this, a vegetarian, ultra-shy Indian kid in Victorian London. He tried so hard to fit in. He took dancing lessons. He tried to learn the violin. He even bought a fancy silk hat and spent time fixing his hair in the mirror. He wanted to be the perfect English gentleman, but it didn't fit. He felt like a fraud. Eventually, he realized that the dancing and the violin weren't for him. He settled down, started reading about vegetarianism not just as a religious thing, but as a choice, and he stumbled upon the Bhagavad Gita for the first time. Ironically, in English. He finished his law studies, went back to India, and he was a total flop. The first time he stood up in court to argue a case, his knees started shaking so hard he had to sit back down. He couldn't say a word. He actually had to hand the case off to someone else and leave the courtroom in shame. He couldn't even get a job as a teacher. He was basically a failed lawyer at that point. Then, a job offer came from South Africa. A firm needed a lawyer for a year. Gandhi thought, why not? It's a change of scenery, and maybe I can actually make some money. He arrives in South Africa in 1893, wearing his fancy suit, feeling like a proper British trained lawyer. He boards a train Pretoria and gets a first-class ticket. Now, this is the moment where history shifts. A white passenger walks in, sees this brown man in first class, and goes to the railway officials. They tell Gandhi to go to the third-class carriage, the van compartment. Gandhi, for the first time in his life, finds his backbone. He says, no, I have a first-class ticket. They didn't argue. They just called a cop and threw him off the train at Pietermaritzburg station. It was freezing cold. His luggage was gone. He sat there in the dark, shivering on a wooden bench, and he had a choice. He could go back to India and forget the whole thing, or he could stay and fight. That night on that cold bench, that was the birth of the Gandhi we know. He realized that the gentleman's suit didn't protect him from racism. He realized that law wasn't just about books. It was about justice. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't going back to India in a year. He was about to spend the next 20 years in South Africa, turning himself into a weapon of peace. He was done being shy. The failed lawyer was gone, and something else was waking up.
Part 2. The Birth of Truth Force, 1893 to 1914.
So, Gandhi is sitting on that freezing train station bench in South Africa. Most people would have been on the first boat back to India, right? Not this guy. That night, something clicked. He realized he wasn't just fighting for his own seat in first class. He was fighting for the dignity of every Indian living in South Africa. He stayed. And man, did he stay. He ended up spending 21 years there. At first, he's still playing the professional lawyer part. He's writing petitions, organizing the Native Indian Congress, and trying to use the British legal system to fix things. He actually thought, hey, if I show them we're loyal subject of the Queen, they'll treat us better. He even organized an ambulance corps during the Boer War. He was out there on the front lines, carrying stretchers, risking his life for the British. He got medals for it. But did the British say thanks by giving Indians more rights? Nope. They did the opposite. In 1906, the government in the Transvaal passed this Black Act. Every Indian had to register, give their fingerprints, and carry a pass at all times. It was humiliating. This is when Gandhi realizes that petitions and polite letters aren't going to cut it anymore. He gathers thousands of people at an old theater in Johannesburg. He tells them, we aren't going to obey this law, but we aren't going to hit anyone either. This was the birth of Satyagraha. Now, don't confuse this with being passive. It's true force. It's basically saying, I'm going to stand here and tell you you're wrong. You can beat me. You can throw me in jail. You can even kill me. But I'm not going to move, and I am not going to hate you. Imagine how confusing that was for the British cops. They were used to people running away or fighting back. But these guys, they just stood there. They let themselves be arrested. Gandhi himself got thrown in the clink multiple times. And you know what he did in jail? He read. He meditated. He made a pair of sandals for General Smuts, the guy who was literally the head of the government trying to oppress him. That's a total power move, right? I'm in your jail and I'm making you shoes. During this time, Gandhi starts changing. He's done with the silk hats and the fancy London suits. He starts living on a communal farm called Tolstoy Farm. He's baking his own bread, cleaning his own toilets, and simplifying everything. He's realizing that if you want to lead the people, you have to look like the people. The climax of his South African adventure was the Great March in 1913. He led thousands of Indian miners and workers across the border, breaking the law on purpose. The world was watching. The British were embarrassed. Eventually, General Smuts had to give in. They struck a deal, repealed some of the worst laws, and Gandhi realized his true force actually worked. He'd gone into South Africa as a shy, failing lawyer. He left in 1914 as a leader who knew exactly how to make an empire sweat. But India was a whole different beast. It was huge, it was divided, and it was much more dangerous. He was heading home, but he wasn't the same man who left 20 years ago. He was a veteran of the struggle, and he was about to bring the fight to the biggest stage of all.
Part 3. The Mahatma and the Massacre, 1915 to 1919.
So, Gandhi lands back in India in 1915. Now, word had traveled. People knew about the guy who made the British blink in South Africa. He was a bit of a celebrity, but he was smart enough to know he didn't actually know India. He'd been gone for 20 years, man. The country had changed, and he'd changed even more. His mentor, a guy named Gokhale, gave him some solid advice. He told Gandhi, keep your mouth shut for a year. Just travel, see the country, listen to the people. And that's exactly what he did. But he didn't do it in a private carriage or a fancy car. He traveled third class. He sat on the floor of crowded, sweaty, dusty train cars with the poorest of the poor. He saw the hunger. He saw the hopelessness. He realized that the Indian National Congress, the guys trying to get independence, were mostly a bunch of rich, city-dwelling lawyers who had no idea what life was like in the villages. This is when the Mahatma started to really emerge. He ditched the last of his Western clothes. He started wearing the simple loincloth, the dhoti. He wanted to look like the man in the field, not the man in the office. People started calling him Mahatma, great soul. He wasn't a fan of the title, honestly. He thought it was a burden, but it stuck. His first real test in India came in a place called Champaran. The British landlords, they were basically enslaving the local farmers, forcing them to grow indigo instead of food. It was a nightmare. Gandhi shows up, and the British tell him to beat it. He says, nope. He doesn't organize a riot. He doesn't throw a single brick. He just starts documenting the farmers' stories. He gathers evidence. Thousands of people show up just to see him. The British realized they couldn't just arrest him without starting a revolution. In the end, the British gave in. It was a massive win. Suddenly, the name Gandhi wasn't just a rumor. It was a hope. But then things got dark, really dark. 1919, the British were getting nervous. They passed the Rowlatt Act, which was basically a fancy way of saying, we can throw anyone in jail for any reason, no trial, no lawyer, nothing. It was a total middle finger to justice. Gandhi called for a national day of fasting and prayer, a strike. He wanted the whole country to just stop, and it worked. Millions of people didn't go to work. The British panicked. They didn't know how to handle people who weren't fighting back. In the city of Amritsar, a huge crowd gathered at a place called Jallianwala Bagh. Now, here's the thing. They weren't even all there for a protest. It was a festival day. Families, kids, old people, they were just hanging out in this walled-in garden. Along comes General Dyer, a guy who had a very old-school way of handling things. He marched his troops in, blocked the only exit, and without a single warning, he told them to open fire. It was a massacre, pure and simple. For 10 minutes, they just kept shooting until they ran out of ammo. Hundreds were killed, thousands wounded. The ground was literally soaked in blood. The news of Amritsar hit Gandhi like a gut punch. It changed everything. Before this, he still kind of believed that the British were fair deep down. After Amritsar, he realized the system was broken beyond repair. He didn't want to reform the British Empire anymore. He wanted them out. Cooperation with such a government is a sin, he said. He was done being a polite lawyer. He was about to launch the biggest nonviolent rebellion the world had ever seen. He was going to take on the most powerful empire on earth with nothing but a spinning wheel and the truth.
Part 4. The Spinning Wheel and the Heartbreak, 1920 to 1924.
So, after 1919, Gandhi basically tells India, look, we've been suckers. We've been helping the British run our own country. If we just stop helping them, the whole thing collapses in a week. He calls it the non-cooperation movement. And man, it was a vibe. He tells people to quit their government jobs. He tells students to walk out of British schools. He tells lawyers to stop practicing in British courts. But the biggest thing? The clothes. See, the British were making a fortune off Indian cotton. They'd take the raw cotton from India, ship it to these massive mills in Manchester, turn it into cloth, and then ship it back to India to sell it to the Indians at a huge profit. It was a total racket. Gandhi says, burn it, all of it. And they did. Imagine these massive bonfires in the streets of Mumbai and Delhi. People throwing their expensive English suits and dresses into the flames. Gandhi starts pushing the charkha, the spinning wheel. He tells everyone to spin their own yarn and wear khadi, homespun cloth. He's basically saying that self-reliance is the first step to freedom. If you can't even dress yourself without the British, how are you going to rule yourself? For a couple of years, it was working. The British were sweating. The prisons were overflowing. Gandhi was promising Swaraj, self-rule, within a year. The energy was electric, man. People were finally feeling like they had some power. Then 1922 happens. A place called Chairi Chaura, a group of protesters, is marching, and the police start messing with them. They open fire. The crowd loses it. They chase the cops back into the police station, lock the doors, and set the whole building on fire. 22 policemen were burned alive. When Gandhi hears about this, he doesn't celebrate. He doesn't say, that'll show him. He's devastated. He goes on a fast and, in a move that absolutely shocks his followers, he calls the whole revolution off. Just like that. People were furious, man. Leaders like Nehru and Bose were like, are you kidding me? We were this close to winning. But Gandhi wouldn't budge. He said, if we win through violence, we'll just become another version of the British. We aren't ready for freedom yet, because we haven't mastered ourselves. It was a huge gamble, and it cost him. The British saw that his movement had stalled, so they finally grew some guts and arrested him for sedition. They put him on trial, and it was the trial of the century. Gandhi didn't even try to defend himself. He basically said, yeah, I did it. I broke your laws because your laws are garbage. Give me the maximum sentence. The judge actually felt bad. He told Gandhi, I have to send you away, but if the government lets you out early, I'll be the happiest guy in the room. They gave him 6 years. He ended up only serving 2 because he got appendicitis and had to have surgery, so they let him out in 1924. But when he walked out of that prison, the world had changed. The Hindus and Muslims, who were united during the strikes, were now fighting each other. The political momentum was gone. Gandhi looked around and realized he had to start all over again. He didn't jump back into politics right away. He went back to his ashram, picked up a spinning wheel, and started focusing on the small stuff. Cleaning toilets, fighting for the untouchables, the people at the bottom of the caste system, and trying to heal the rift between religions. People thought he was washed up. They thought the Mahatma was yesterday's news. But they forgot one thing. Gandhi was a marathon runner, not a sprinter. He was just waiting for the right moment to strike again. And that moment, it was going to involve a handful of salt and a 240-mile walk.
Part 5. A Pinch of Salt and a King's Palace, 1930 to 1931.
So, it's the late 1920s. Gandhi's been lying low, doing boring stuff like social work and teaching people how to spin cloth. The younger guys in the independence movement, like Nehru, are getting restless. They're like, Bapu, come on. We want independence now. No more waiting. In 1930, they basically tell the British, give us Dominion status in 1 year, or we're going for full-blown independence. The British, being the British, just ignored them. So the Congress turns to Gandhi. They say, "All right, old man, do your thing. What's the plan? We're ready to fight." Everyone expected a big call for a national strike or some massive protests in the cities. Instead, Gandhi says, "I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to talk about salt." Salt? Seriously? People were baffled. Nehru was like, "We're trying to topple an empire, and you're talking about seasoning?" But Gandhi was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. See, the British had a total monopoly on salt. It didn't matter if you were Hindu, Muslim, rich, or dirt poor. You needed salt to live. And the British made it illegal for you to just pick it up off the beach. You had to buy it from them and pay a salt tax. It was a tax on being alive, and it hit the poorest people the hardest. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi leaves his ashram with 78 followers. He's 60 years old, skinny as a rail, carrying a bamboo walking stick. He's heading for a tiny coastal village called Dandi. It's a 240-mile walk. At first, the British laughed. They thought he was a joke. "The old man is going for a stroll," they said. Big mistake. The Salt March became a global media circus. Every day, Gandhi walked about 10 to 15 miles. And every day, more people joined him. By the time he reached the sea 24 days later, there were thousands behind him. Journalists from all over the world were following him, sending back stories about the scrawny rebel taking on the British lion. On the morning of April 6, Gandhi walks down to the shore at Dandi. He bends over, picks up a small lump of salty mud, and holds it up. He just broke the law. Suddenly, the whole country goes nuts. All over India's massive coastline, millions of people start boiling seawater to make their own salt. The British are panicking. They arrest 60,000 people. They throw Nehru in jail. They throw Gandhi in jail. But you can't arrest the whole country. The jails are literally bursting at the seams. The British realized they had to talk. Lord Irwin, the viceroy, sits down with Gandhi. Two guys in a palace, drinking tea. They make a deal. Gandhi agrees to stop the protests if the British let people make their own salt and release the prisoners. Then comes a London trip in 1931. Gandhi goes to England for the Round Table Conference to talk about India's future. Now, imagine this. The British elite are all dressed in tuxedos, top hats, and military uniforms. And here comes Gandhi, wearing his simple loincloth and a shawl, walking into St. James's Palace. He even meets King George V. A reporter later asked him if he felt underdressed meeting the King of England. Gandhi just smiled and said, "The king was wearing enough for both of us." That's a legendary burn, man. But here's the reality. The meetings in London were a bit of a bust. The British weren't ready to let go of their crown jewel yet. They tried to play different Indian groups against each other. Hindus against Muslims, high caste against untouchables. Gandhi went back to India empty-handed in terms of a treaty, but he'd won something much bigger. He'd humiliated the British on the world stage. He'd shown that the empire didn't have a moral leg to stand on. But the biggest test was still coming. World War II was on the horizon, and it was going to tear the world and India apart. Gandhi was about to give the British his final ultimatum: quit India.
Part 6. The Broken Dream and the Final Breath, 1939 to 1948.
So, 1939 rolls around. World War II kicks off. Hitler is tearing through Europe, and the British are suddenly fighting for their lives. They turn to India and say, "Hey, we need your help. Millions of soldiers. Please. Also, don't ask for independence right now, okay? We're a bit busy." Gandhi wasn't having it. He wasn't a fan of the Nazis, obviously, but he told the British, "You can't fight for freedom in Europe while you're keeping us in chains here. It doesn't work that way." In 1942, he launches his biggest, boldest move yet, the Quit India movement. He gives this legendary speech where he tells the people two words, "Do or die." He wasn't talking about killing. He was saying we either get our freedom now or we die trying. The British didn't wait around. They arrested Gandhi, his wife Kasturba, and the entire leadership of the Congress within hours. They spent most of the war in prison. And man, it was a rough time for Gandhi. His wife Kasturba, who'd been by his side since they were 13, died in his arms while they were locked up. His longtime secretary and friend died, too. By the time the British let him out in 1944, he was an old, grieving man. But the war had broken the British Empire. They were flat out broke. They knew they couldn't hold India anymore. The problem was India was splitting at the seams. You had the Hindu-Muslim tension that had been bubbling for decades. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, wanted a separate country, Pakistan. Gandhi was devastated. He'd spent his whole life saying Hindus and Muslims were two eyes of the same face. He begged people to stay together, but the fear was too deep. August 15th, 1947. India finally gets its independence. You'd think Gandhi would be in Delhi, making speeches and celebrating, right? Nope, he wasn't there. He was hundreds of miles away in Kolkata, staying in a poor neighborhood, fasting and praying. Why? Because the country was on fire. Partition, the split between India and Pakistan, triggered one of the biggest, bloodiest migrations in history. Neighbors were killing neighbors. Millions were fleeing across the new borders. It was a total bloodbath. Gandhi didn't use an army to stop it. He just used his own body. He went on a fast unto death. He said, "I will not eat another bite until the killing stops." And you know what? It worked. People were so afraid of being responsible for the Mahatma's death that they actually laid down their weapons. Even the toughest guys in the street were crying at his feet, promising to stop the violence. It was probably his greatest miracle. But not everyone was happy. There were some radical Hindu nationalists who thought Gandhi was too soft on Muslims and Pakistan. They thought he was betraying his own people. One of them was a guy named Nathuram Godse. January 30th, 1948. New Delhi. Gandhi is 78 years old, weak from fasting, walking to a prayer meeting at Birla House. He's leaning on his two grandnieces, his walking sticks. Godse steps out of the crowd. He bows to Gandhi, showing respect for the old man. Then he pulls out a small Beretta pistol and fires 3 shots into Gandhi's chest at point-blank range. Gandhi falls. His last words? "Hey, Ram." Oh, God. The news hit the world like a lightning bolt. Albert Einstein, the smartest guy on earth, said, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as is ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." And that's the story, but Gandhi wasn't a perfect guy. He was stubborn, he had some weird ideas, and he made plenty of mistakes. But he proved one thing that the world still struggles to wrap its head around. You don't need a gun to change the world. You just need enough guts to stand your ground, tell the truth, and be willing to suffer for it without hitting back. He went from a shy kid who couldn't speak in court to a man who brought the biggest empire in history to its knees just by walking to beach and picking up some salt. Not a bad legacy, right?